This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today's learning should be Lili Nishmas Yeshua ben Yitzchak Chaya Bas Gershon Yosef Began Eden Timnu Chasam. Today we're going to speak about an unprecedented topic. Any other topic we would talk about, even the most contemporary subject, even a subject about the most modern advancements in technology, very quickly we could immediately identify a Gemara that speaks about the principles of that topic and very swiftly apply the principles of the Shas to even the most advanced subject. So for example, people want to know artificial intelligence. Do Chazal talk about artificial intelligence? Do Chazal talk about a scenario where you walk into a house and you just speak and your words trigger technology? Is that an action? Is that not an action? And you think, no, there's no way Chazal could have spoken about that. And you see very clearly there's a Gemara in the Masechta Bava Metzia. It talks about, you're not allowed to muzzle your animal when it's working in the field. And the Gemara talks about, well, what if you scream at the animal, and by screaming at the animal stops eating, and that's considered muzzling, so your words are causing an act. Is that an act? Is that not an act? It's Machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Ultimately, Paskin, it is an act, and therefore, if you were to walk into a house and say, what are the names? Alexa, Siri. My wife's name is Suri, but Alexa, turn on the air conditioner, turn off the air conditioner, turn on the light. Is that a Chilul Shabbos? Is that a Shinoi? It's Doraisa. It's Doraisa. It's a Maisa. It's an act. It's an act. Your words, cause, result is an act. So here it is, 2024. There's new technology, and Chazal spoke about it 1,500 years ago. But the subject we're going to speak about today is unprecedented. Chazal don't really speak about it. And the reason why this subject is literally the most unprecedented subject in Halacha is because who would have ever dreamt, after Nebuchadnezzar exiled the Jewish people, that we would one day come back to Eretz Yisrael and we would have an army, and it would be a powerful army, and there would be a question of ethics of warfare. For 2,000 years we're running for our life. For 2,000 years we're facing persecution. We're facing all kinds of terrible situations. It was never what we call Yadenu Tkifa. We never had the power to exercise military might. And now for the first time in 2,000 years, there is a country, whatever your position is about it, there is an army, and there are moral and ethical dilemmas, and the question is, where do we turn? There are no Gemaras that talk about how a Jewish army is supposed to fight. Do we need to be concerned for quote-unquote innocent civilians? Okay, whether they're innocent or not. We know they voted Hamas in, we know most of them support what happened, but on a fundamental level, is this something we have to be concerned? Where do we turn? You can't just, make up what sounds right. Now I want to share with you something amazing. Actually, some of the names we're going to speak about today, maybe you haven't heard them been cited in the yeshivas you went to. Nevertheless, in order to have an appreciation for the history of the subject, I may mention some rabbanim that maybe you're not familiar with or are not part of your machana, as they called, but still, in order to appreciate the subject, you have to know the background of it. So, for example, Rav Shaul Yisraeli, he lived from 1909 to 1995. He wrote the single most influential essay on Jewish ethics of war. Rav Shaul Yisraeli, when he wrote this article, it sent shockwaves across the Jewish world, across the world in general. He wrote, and just to get a little bit of his history, he grew up in the Belarus. His father was exiled for teaching Torah. Rabbi Shaul, the son, continued to teach underground. He's caught in 1933. and he's sentenced to death, and he was going to be executed, and he was saved.
Which country?
In Belarus.
Where is that? Belarus. Part of the former Soviet Union.
And he was saved by Rabbi Yitzchak Kook, and he comes to Eretz Yisrael. He became a student of Rav Kook, then a student of Rabbi Yehuda Kook, and ultimately he became the Rosh Hashiva of Merkaz Harav. And he wrote an article that Judaism does not have moral requirements of how to fight war. That the Torah does not have dictates of moral responsibility for war. So what? How could such a thing be? We're very not used to thinking that way. How could you even say such a thing? The way we grew up, there's nothing that we do the entire day that the halacha doesn't have what to say about it. You get up in the morning, the Torah says how to put on your shoes. You put on your right shoe, you put on your left shoe. A man ties his left shoe first and then ties his right shoe. I think a woman ties her right shoe first and then ties her left shoe.
No, the left and right. That's because they do the opposite on the left and the right.
No, it depends on tefillin. You'll look it up. Ask your people. Okay? It depends on the tefillin. Depends on the tefillin. A man... I'm talking about, I didn't realize that this was going to get into a military battle over the shoes. Yeah?
Okay, but it's not to stand up. It's not in the right place.
So, he wrote that Judaism doesn't have what to say about the ethics of warfare. He says, where does it come from that you're allowed to go to war in the first place? He says there's an idea, there's a certain covenant of humanity, where humanity has a certain bond, an agreement, an understood recognition that there are times that call for war. And if the philosophy of humanity at a certain time is you have to be concerned for innocent civilians, then Judaism is bound by that. If the philosophy of the times are you don't have to be concerned for innocent civilians, then we don't have to. If you only have to be concerned for innocent civilians who don't want to leave, then that's what we're governed by. If you don't have to be concerned for innocent civilians that are shielding terrorists, then that's the rule. There's no halacha, there's no Gemara, there's no Shulchan Aruch. The rules of warfare are bound by a new guideline. It's called the binding of humanity, the covenant of humanity. And this was very surprising, but you may be surprised to learn that a good segment of Jews in the state of Israel subscribe to this philosophy even today. However, there was another rabbi. This rabbi was a great scholar. He was very courageous, somewhat of a controversial individual. And he came to Palestine at the end of the war. He fought in the Haganah, he fought with the IDF, he became the chief chaplain of the IDF, and then the chief rabbi of the state of Israel. Rabbi Shlomo Goren. He was the first one to write a sefer on what we call the ethics of war. He was probably most controversial for his ruling on the Langer twins. There were two twins, and there was a question about their legitimacy or lack thereof. And Rav Shlomo Goren ruled that they were permitted, Rav Shlomo Goren, that they're permitted lavoi b'kahal. And many Gedolim disagreed, but you should know, many great halachic authorities agreed with him. That was probably his most controversial ruling. He's best known for blowing the shofar upon the liberation of the Jewish quarter, the Western Wall, and then actually he single-handedly liberated Hebron ahead of the IDF, and ultimately Moshe Dayan gave the keys back to the Arabs. That's Rabbi Shlomo Goren. He wrote a major work, it's called Meshiv Halacha, where he created from scratch an entire edifice of the ethics of warfare. I'm going to share with you some of it, but the question then is, how do you build the ethics of war? Where do you start from? There are no Gemaras, there are no Mefarshim, there's no Rambam that tells you what the ethics of war are. So we have no choice. We may have to go straight to the Chumash itself. Now here's the $1 million question. Can you learn out halacha from Chumash? Can you learn out halacha from Chumash?
I think so.
Can you learn out halacha from Chumash? So turn in your booklets to page 28. We know there's a question. There are two portions of the Gemara. There's the what we call Shmaitza and Agadata. Shmaitza are the halachic portions of the Gemara. Agadata are the Agadic portions. You know what the Agadata is? Let's say the stories of the Gemara. Could you learn out halacha from the stories of the Gemara? That's a very big machlokes. The opinion of the Shvus Yaakov is you could only learn out halacha from Agadata Gemara if there's no contradiction from elsewhere in the Shas. Others hold, and Rabbi Yehuda holds, period. You cannot learn out halacha from Agadata Gemara. But could you learn out from Chumash? Could you learn out halacha from a story in the Chumash, from narrative? If you look in the Bavli, in the Talmud Bavli, the Bavli doesn't really learn out halacha straight from the Chumash, straight from the Tanakh. You need Tarsha Bal Peh, you need Mefarshim. But in this case, we don't really have that. Actually, Rav Asher Weiss writes that it once came to him, a judge from the Supreme Court of Israel came to him with the following shaila. Okay, I don't know if you're going to like this one. A husband murdered his wife. No, we're just getting started. And then he wanted to know, can he get her Yerusha? So Rav Asher Weiss began his ruling based on what it says in the Navi, when Navos Yisraeli was killed by Yizebel, and now they want to give over his kerem to Achav. So what did Eliyahu say? Haratzachta, v'gam yarashta. You murdered. Now you want to inherit also? No. You say, well, but you can't learn out halacha from Tanakh. Yeah, but maybe you could learn out rational thinking from Tanakh. In other words, you might not be able to learn halacha precisely, but a certain rational approach you should be able to take from Tanakh. So that's the question. Can we learn out from Tanakh the ethics of war? So let's turn to page number 4. We know that when Yaakov Avinu was about to face Esav and his 400 men, the pasuk says, "Vayira Yaakov ma'od." Yaakov was very afraid. Vayetzer lo, and he was distressed. And Chazal say, what was Yaakov Avinu distressed about? Shema yaharog achirim. He was afraid lest he kill others. What does that mean? The Maharal explains. He was afraid, maybe in the clutches of the war, he may kill people who are innocent, who just got swept up in the culture of Esav, and Yaakov was afraid he may kill, quote unquote, innocent civilians. So maybe is this a basis that you have to be concerned for the lives of innocent civilians? Or how about this? Look on page 6. When Shaul HaMelech was about to embark on killing the Amaleki, Vayomer Shaul el Hakeni. Now, among the Amaleki in the south of Eretz Yisrael was embedded the family of the Keni. Who's the Keni? The family of Yisrael. Very good. So he didn't want to kill the Keni. So what does Shaul HaMelech do? Vayomer Shaul el Hakeni. L'chu suru rudu mitoch Amaleki. Get out of here. Get lost. Scram. Penoi sivcha imai. Lest you get caught up with him. So, this is what we call primitive door knocking. The Israeli army is the only army where they literally knock on the door. They say, Herzachain, terrorists and non-terrorists, we're coming in an hour, get out of here. Well, you think only the non-terrorists leave? And by the way, now they have many different ways of doing this. They send text messages, they drop leaflets. They even have something called advanced door knocking, where they'll drop a bomb. The bomb makes a big explosion because you have people, they don't want to leave, no matter what. You could send them a text message. Leave in 30 minutes, otherwise you're dead meat. They won't leave. So they'll drop a bomb, the bomb makes a big explosion, and it doesn't kill anyone, it doesn't cause injury, and people run away from that. Do you have to do that? Should we learn from this pasuk that Shaul tells the Keni, we're coming, we don't want to kill you, you're innocent civilians. Should we learn from this pasuk that you're required to do that? But if you read the end of the pasuk says that Shaul says, the reason why I'm giving you this courtesy is Vi'ata asisa chesed em kol bnei Yisrael. your ancestor Yisrael did chesed for the Jewish people, so we owe you a favor. So we have hakaras hatov to you. So therefore, we're extending this courtesy to you. Can you extrapolate? By the same token, we need to do that to Palestinians. We don't owe them anything. We have no hakaras hatov to them. We don't owe them this courtesy. So that's the big question. How do we utilize the narrative of the Chumash to be able to learn out halacha l'maisa? So I want to share with you how Rabbi Goren began by building his edifice. I want to share with you a Maharal, a little lumdus, and then a general perspective, okay? Have you ever heard the Chazal that says, when Hashem created the world, how many cows did He create? 2? No, this is not the Teva of Noach. I want to know how many cows? A lot. People need to eat steak. How many ants did He create? Millions. How many mosquitoes? Billions. How many horses? Innumerable. Hashem created many of every type of creation and species, but He only created one man. Says the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Lefikach nivra adam yichidi, lelamedcha to teach you, shekol hama'abed nefesh achas mi Yisrael. Anyone who wastes even one Jewish life, malo alav hakasav ki'ilu kiyem olam alei, the Torah considers it like he upheld the whole world. But if someone is ma'abed, in other words, if you destroy one Jewish life, it's like you destroy the whole world. You save kol hamakayim nefesh achas mi Yisrael ki'ilu kiyem olam alei. So Rav Goren, who is a scholar, studied many versions of this Mishnah. When I say versions, there are many different editions of the earliest defusim of the Shas. You have the printing in Leningrad, in Oxford, in Bodleian. And Rav Goren noticed that in many of the authentic texts of the Gemara, it doesn't say, Kol hama'abei nefesh achas mi Yisrael. It just says, Kol hama'abei nefesh achas. After all, was Adam HaRishon Jewish? No. So if the source is Adam HaRishon, is it only someone who destroys a Jewish life or someone who destroys life in general? And Rav Goren concluded that based on many accurate texts of the Gemara, it is not specifically mi Yisrael. In other words, here's the $1 million question. We know, does somebody have to risk their life? Does a man have to risk their life to wear tzitzis? No. Does a man have to risk their life to wear tefillin? Does a Jew have to risk their life to eat kosher food? No, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. How do we know you're not allowed to? V'chai bohem. Meaning, Jewish life is more important than the mitzvahs of the Torah. By the way, what's more important? A Jew or a Sefer Torah? A Jew. If a Sefer Torah is in a shul burning on Shabbos, you're allowed to put out the fire to save the Sefer Torah? Absolutely not. But a Jewish life, of course you put out the fire. People make a mistake. A Jew has more sanctity than a Sefer Torah. That's Pasha. The question is, we know in Judaism, Jewish life is of the greatest importance. Under that is the performance of mitzvahs. What about human life in general? Do we say that just like Jewish life is the ultimate value, is all human life of the ultimate value, or only Jewish life? Well, says Rav Goren, it's going to depend. It's very interesting. There's a machlokes. What's the most important pasuk in the Torah? Rabbi Akiva said, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha zeh klal gadol b'Torah. What does Ben Azai say? Ben Azai says, no, wrong pasuk. Ben Azai says, Zeh sefer todos adam. Ki b'tselem elokim baras adam. So Rabbi Akiva says the most important pasuk is V'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. L'reacha. Reacha is your friend, your fellow Jew, the life of a fellow Jew. That's the ultimate value. Ben Azai says, no, not only a fellow Jew. Ki b'tselem elokim asas adam. The life of a human being. In that case, Rav Goren says, do we in our endeavors, military ambition, do we need to be concerned for the lives of innocent human beings or not? So, let's try to find a narrative in the Chumash from which we could glean what is the Torah's value on human life. So I'm going to bring to your attention now. Rabbi Goren looks at this narrative, he derives one approach. The Maharal will look at it, and he comes to an exact opposite conclusion. Okay? An exact opposite conclusion. And that story is Shimon and Levi. You remember Shimon and Levi? So Dinah is walking out one day, Vayetze Dinah. Dinah is abducted. Dinah is violated. Shimon and Levi are not happy about that. So Shimon and Levi go. They kill Shechem ben Chamar. Well, first the plan is everyone has to have a bris milah. Then Shimon and Levi go. They kill Shechem ben Chamar, whereupon they wipe out the entire city. Yaakov Avinu says, "What are you doing? Achartem oisi, you sullied my reputation in the whole world." And who has the last word? Shimon and Levi say, No. Tati, hakazoino yasas acheseno, you're going to let our sister be treated like that? End of story. Yaakov Avinu criticizes them, and they don't take it. They say, "No, we can't let. We could not allow that to happen." The Rambam comes, and the Rambam asks, "What right did Shimon and Levi have to kill the entire city?" The Rambam says they were all chayiv misa. Shechem kidnapped. They saw. They knew. They didn't try him in court. Gentiles are obligated to have a judicial system. They didn't have a just system. They're all chayiv misa, the Rambam says. That's why Shimon and Levi, they have the final word. They say, how could you let this happen? How could you allow our sister to be kazaina? However, the Ramban disagrees. The Ramban says, really? They were all chayiv misa? Then Yaakov Avinu himself should have led the charge and killed out the whole city. But Yaakov Avinu didn't participate. That means Yaakov held they didn't do the right thing. And the Ramban says, therefore, they did not act correctly. So if I were to ask you, when it comes to innocent civilians, so we know the terrorists, of course, they're roidfim, they're trying to take our lives. We have to eliminate them. But what about others? Can we eliminate the others? It should be a machlekes Rambam and Ramban. According to the Rambam, look, they don't have a judicial system. The whole society is corrupt. The whole society is a murderous society. You have to eliminate everyone. According to the Ramban says no, they were not authorized to eliminate innocent civilians. However, says Rabbi Goren, the story didn't end in Parshas Vayishlach. Because then, let's fast forward to Parshas Vayechi. Yaakov Avinu is on his deathbed. And Yaakov Avinu said, I remember what you told me. You said, Hakazoina yasas achesenu. Now I'm going to have the last word. Shimon v'Levi achim. Klei chamas mecheroi seham. Besoidam al tavai nafshi. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Bekahal amal techet kavoidi. Ki ba'apam harguish. Oror apam ki oz. V'avrasam ki kashasa. Yaakov Avinu cursed them. And then he died. Says Rabbi Goren. But according to the Rambam, they did the right thing. Why is Yaakov so upset with them? So Rabbi Goren marshals a Yushalmi. An amazing Yushalmi. The Yushalmi is found on page 46. I knew you wanted to know. How are we going to get from page 12 to page 46? But we're going to come back. The Yushalmi is found in Masechta Chumash. So if your husband asks, what did you learn today? You say, I learned Yushalmi in Chumash. What did you learn? Okay, so the Yushalmi is talking about something very interesting. What's the halacha? If somebody puts a gun to Ruvain's head and they say, Ruvain, we're going to kill you if you don't kill Shimon. Could Ruvain kill Shimon to save his own skin? No. You can't commit murder to save your life. What if they say, Ruvain, we're going to push you on Shimon and kill Shimon, otherwise we're going to kill you. could Reuven allow himself to be pushed onto Shimon? Yes. Okay, why?
He's not supposed to.
You can't be active, but you could be passive. What's the logic of that? The basic logic is no human being can play God. No one could make their own decision whose life is more valuable to Hashem. So you're asking Reuven to actively kill Shimon? He has no right to actively kill Shimon. Reuven's going to stand there and they're going to push him and they're making that decision? That's your call. I can't make that call. Now, what's the halacha? Gentiles surround the city. They say, we're killing everyone unless you hand over somebody. Are you allowed to hand over somebody to save 1 million people? Yeah, you're right. No. You can't do it.
But how? Because she did it.
Who?
She did it.
Who?
What about
Sarah?
Wasn't it Sarah put it on when they had?
I missed that day in yeshiva. I don't know. Okay. So now, what if the Gentiles say, "Give us a barrel, or we'll kill everyone"? So they designate somebody. You're allowed to give over a barrel? Yes. Fine. With that, because they've already designated him. And otherwise everyone's going to die. You can't designate. You're not playing God. They've already designated. Now, the Yerushalmi tells us a story about Ula bar Kosev. Ula bar Kosev, he's a wanted man. The Gentiles surrounded the city. They say, Ula bar Kosev, give yourself up, otherwise we're going to destroy the whole city. He doesn't want to go. Comes Rabbi Shua ben Levi and he persuades him, he sweet talks him, he says, look, either way you're going to die. You might as well allow us to be saved. Ula bar Kosev gives himself in. He's killed, the city is saved. Rabbi Shua ben Levi always had a very eminent chavrusa. His name was Eliyahu HaNavi. Eliyahu HaNavi no longer would learn with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi fasted. And Eliyahu says, I can't talk to you. You're a moiser. I don't talk to you anymore. So what do you want from me? I followed the halacha. What should I have done? What would you have liked me to have done? That everyone should have died? Those were the two options. The options are either he hands himself in, or everybody dies. Eliyahu says, you're right, that's the halacha. But what you did is not Mishnas Chasidim, it wasn't righteous. And we're going to come back to that at the end of the shir. Says Rabbi Goren, we learned from this Yerushalmi that when it comes to human life, there is a parameter above and beyond halacha. You can't just follow halacha when it comes to human life. When it comes to human life, you have to take every precautionary step. You have to do more than the halacha. Another proof to this is that we know that a Jewish court is allowed to give capital punishment. Nevertheless, the Gemara says that any Jewish court that gave capital punishment more than once in every 70 years was considered a murderous court. Why? That's the halacha. This person deserves capital punishment. The answer is, we don't just follow halacha when it comes to human life. We do everything in our power, we jump through hoops to try to save lives. Therefore, Rabbi Goren says that even though technically speaking, if you have lone terrorists, according to the Rambam, everyone is liable. And even according to the Ramban, according to the Ramban, you can't take everyone's life. And even according to the Rambam, that you're allowed to take everyone's life, you're allowed to. But when it comes to taking lives, you can't do what you're allowed to do. You have to go above and beyond that. Okay? And based on this, Rabbi Goren developed a whole edifice. The number of wars, for example, the war in Beirut, Rabbi Goren always said, you have to leave one side open to let them run away. And there were times that he demanded that. One of the times that he demanded that, Arafat ran away. And shortly after, Israel paid a very costly price with different terrorist attacks. I'm just bringing to your attention, I'm not saying we follow this, we paskin like this. Be aware of where the basis of the ideology came from. But now I want to bring to your attention a completely different approach from the very same narrative, which is derived from that the Maharal understands, and maybe is more the normative halachic viewpoint on this issue. If I could bring your attention to page 15. Okay, this is the Gur Aryeh on Rashi on the story of Shimon and Levi. The Maharal on page 15. So Rabbi Goren looks at the story of Shimon and Levi, and he derives, Yaakov Avinu has the last word. He says, your anger is cursed, and from there he learns you have to go above and beyond halacha when it comes to human life. On page 15, the Gur Aryeh says, on the bottom line on the right-hand side, Venira deloi kashamidi, mishum deloi dami shnei umais, Kagoin B'nai Yisrael u'Kanaaniyim. You cannot compare two nations like the Jewish people and Canaan. Shehim Shnei Umais, they were two different nations. Kidachsiv, like it says, they wanted to be V'hayinu la'am echad, which implies u'metchila in the beginning loy nechshavu la'am echad. They were not considered like one people. U'lefikach hutar lohem lilchaim. Therefore, it was permitted for Shimon and Levi to go to war. Kedin Uma Shaba Lilchaim Al Uma Acheres. Like nation A that is permitted to fight nation B, Shehitira HaTorah, the Torah allows it. The Maharal says, you know why Shimon and Levi were allowed to wipe out the city? Because there's something called war. And when you go to war, you don't fight, let me try to find the bad guy. War means nation 1 against the entirety of nation B. You don't start cherry picking. You don't start slowing down to find the bad guys. Shimon and Levi were going to war. The Maharal asks, but doesn't the Torah say that before you go to war, doesn't the Torah say v'karasa eleha l'shalom? Don't you have to first say, look, we're coming this way. We need this territory. We don't want to kill you. So we're making an advancement of peace. Let's make peace. So why didn't Shimon and Levi do that? Right? That's an important question. Isn't there an idea? Doesn't the Torah say that when you go out to war, you have to make a gesture of peace? So the Gur Aryeh says, "V'afa gav da amra haTorah ki sikra vel ir lihilachem elev v'karasa ela l'shalom hainu heichi deloy asu liyisrael davar." That's if they didn't antagonize us first. Aval heichi da'asu liyisrael davar. If the enemy attacked us, kagain zel, like in this case, shepartsu lahem lasis lahem nevala, that they broke forth to do this atrocity, afal gav delayasa rak echad mehem, even though only one of them did it. Kivan demiklal ha'amhu, since they're from the nation, kivan shepartsu lahem tchila, they started. Mutar likach nikmasam mehem. You're allowed to take revenge from who? Everybody. Everybody. Now there's a big question. Does that mean you don't have to take any precautions not to harm innocent civilians? Or does that mean if the only way to get to the antagonist is through the innocent civilians, so be it? In other words, is it in Lamdas we call it, is it hutra? Is it that it's free reign, everybody's blood is permitted? Or is it, if that's what's necessary, then so be it? But be it as it may, Rav Asher Weiss and other poskim quote this Maharal that when the IDF fights a war, and many write that this war didn't begin on October 7th. It began in 1948. They declared their intention is to liberate from river to river, from sea to sea. We know what they say today, but they didn't make this up today. This was their intention. The constitution of Hamas says that their goal is to eliminate the state of Israel, which means the war started many years ago. And therefore, as the Maharal says, once they take one step against us, then no longer do we have to jump through hoops to cherry pick those who have caused us harm. How much time do I have? What do I have? What, 5 minutes? Okay, man. So first I want to tell you a little lamdus, and then sort of a few closing remarks. The lamdus is like this. We mentioned that one does not have to risk their life to keep a mitzvah in the Torah. There are only 3 exceptions. What are they? Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayah, Shvichas Damim. So the question is, this is a question the Minchas Chinuch asks, is someone allowed to fight a war for the Jewish people? After all, if you only have to risk your life for the 3 cardinal sins, you don't have to risk your life for the state of Israel. That's not one of the 3 primary values. How is somebody allowed to fight a war for the Jewish people? So you say, well, if it's in self-defense to protect Klal Yisrael, so it's saving your own life. But what if it's something called Melchemes Rishus? Melchemes Rishus is to expand your territory, to enlarge Eretz Yisrael. How could somebody fight such a war? You're risking your life. There was never a war that there were no casualties. One time in history, we fought a war and there were no casualties in Sefer Yoshua. Fighting a war means you're putting your life in jeopardy. How is someone allowed to fight a war? It's not one of the 3 cardinal values. Says the Minchas Chinuch, the Brisker Rav says the same thing. It must be that if there's a mitzvah in the Torah fighting a war, by very definition, the mitzvah is to risk your life. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to risk your life. It's not that the mitzvah of fighting a war overrides Jewish life. That is the mitzvah. That is the definition of the mitzvah. There is no war without putting one's life in peril. That's the very definition of the mitzvah. So Rav Asher Weiss offers the following lamdas, very interesting lamdas. If we, the Jewish people, are allowed to fight a war, but what happened to v'chai b'hem? What happened to the idea that Jewish life is the ultimate value? The answer is the definition of war is we're allowed to go to war despite the fact we're risking our life. Then if it applies to the good team, to our side, alachas kama v'kama, it's going to apply to our enemy that we're allowed to go to war even if it's going to mean that innocent people are going to lose their life. Because we're allowed to go to war even though innocent people on our side may lose their life. All the more so we could go to war even if it's going to mean that innocent people on their side are going to lose their life. What would you say about the following case? Imagine if you received intelligence that they know where Sinwar is and they could eliminate him, but there's a hostage in the room with him. And if we eliminate him, we're going to be eliminating one of our own. What if we could save 100 hostages? The only way we could do it is by taking the life of one of them. Could you do it? These are very difficult questions that hopefully we would never have to face. Well, that's a separate question. Maybe one day we'll talk about trading terrorists for hostages. I want to take you back to the story in the Yerushalmi about Ula bar Kosev. Do you remember Ula bar Kosev? He was designated by the Gentiles. They said, hand over Ula bar Kosev or we're going to eliminate the whole city. We're going to kill the whole city. And who convinced Ula bar Kosev to give himself in? Rabbi Shimon and Levi. Okay? And Eliyahu Hanavi used to learn with Rabbi Shimon and Levi, and Eliyahu stopped learning with Rabbi Shimon and Levi because Eliyahu said, even though you're allowed to do it, but it's lav mishnas chasidim. It's not righteous behavior. So the Chazon Ish asks, what do you mean it's not righteous behavior? There are 2 options on the table. Option number 1 is everyone dies. Option number 2 is Ula bar Kosev hands himself in. So what exactly is not righteous about this? Better the alternative? Is that what Rabbi Shimon and Levi should have done? He shouldn't have said anything and the whole city should have been wiped out? Chazon Ish says something incredible. It's on page 47, on the right-hand side, paragraph Ulafizeh. If you, I need these booklets back. If you need them, we'll tell you how you could keep them. But the Chazon Ish says something amazing. Chazon Ish says there's always a third option. You know what the third option is? And this is a valuable lesson in life in general. You know, sometimes we have issues in life. We don't know what to do. Not just life and death. We have questions. Should I say yes? Should I not say yes? Should I go through with this? We don't always know what to do. And sometimes we think there are only two options, yes or no. There's a third option. The third option is, when you don't know what to do, there's someone who does know what to do. The Ribono Shel Olam knows what to do. And the third option is always to be mispalel and say, Ribono Shel Olam, this is above my pay grade. I really don't know what to do over here. Please bail me out of this situation. The Chazon Ish says, Im nizdamein. I'm on page 47. I'm on the last page. The paragraph on the right-hand side that begins Ulafi Zeh. On the third line. Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mazmin davar kazeh l'chasidav. The Ribono Shel Olam would never bring such a situation to those who are righteous. Ve'im nizdamein, and if something like that would come up, l'chasid davar kazeh, tzarich lehispalel sheyatzileu Hashem. One would need to daven that Hashem should save them. Utfilasai vadai tikabal. His tefillah will definitely be listened to. So this is if one was ever posed with such a question, we could eliminate sinwar, but it would mean taking one of our own. We could save the hasid, but it would mean taking the life. It's an impossible question to answer. The only thing we could do, Chazon Ish says, when you don't know what to do, you have to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, you're the only one who could reconcile such a situation. It's a valuable lesson in life in general. There are not always only two options. So, here's a closing idea. So, what should our feeling be? Should a person feel joy in military victory? Should a person feel joy that we're eliminating the enemy? Should a person feel joy in victory? Should a person feel sympathy that people are dying? Should a person feel rachamim that people are suffering? Which one?
All of the above.
Which one? When Klal Yisrael were going through the Yam Suf, the Malachi Asheris wanted to sing Shira. And God said, can't sing. How could you sing at a time like this? But the question is, but the Jewish people were singing. So why could the Jewish people sing and not the angels? Says Reb Shimon Schwab something astonishing. You ever hear the idea an angel can't do two missions?
Yes.
Right? You know, Michael, he could save Lot, but he can't heal Abraham. Or Raphael, he could heal Abraham, but he can't tell Sarah. Like a malach can't ride a bike and chew gum at the same time. What do Chazal mean that a malach can't do two things at the same time? The answer is a malach is not created in the image of Hashem. And therefore, when a malach looks at a situation, he can only see one perspective. If the malach is going to be joyous that Klal Yisrael was saved, then he cannot have any sympathy for the drowning and embittered and pained Mitzrayim. And that would be too callous. God says, my handiwork is drowning. You're going to sing? Malachim, you can't sing. But a human being is created in the image of Hashem. A human being could sing Shira that the Ribono Shel Olam saved them. A human being could sing Shira, victory over the enemy, and at the same time feel some compassion in their heart that the Mitzrayim were drowning. Is it a contradiction? For the angels it's a contradiction. But we're greater than the angels. We are created in the image of the Almighty, that our souls could have the sophistication to rejoice and sing Shira like no one ever sang Shira before, and yet at the same time preserve a certain sense of humanity and compassion and empathy. It's not a contradiction. The author of Slobodka says, the night of the Seder, it's one of the happiest nights of the year. We put our finger in the cup and we take out a little bit of wine. Why? To say, this is certainly Kais Yeshua Is Esa, but we're not completely callous to the suffering of our enemy. Now, it's very dangerous. Sometimes you hear what's happening and you don't know, should I feel empathy or should I be completely cold-hearted? And the answer is, you should rejoice in the victory of Achenu B'nai Yisrael, no question. And it should be a full joy. And yet at the same time, you don't want to completely lose a sense of humanity, empathy, and rachamim. And I think the paradigm of Kriyas Yamsuf is the correct perspective of how we view all nitzachon of Klal Yisrael, that of course we rejoice in the salvation of Achenu B'nai Yisrael, and at the same time, we are Basar V'Dam, and we do have a sense of rachamim. Be'ezus Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom should give us complete nitzachon, and we should be zochet to see the ultimate Yeshua. I wish everybody a wonderful summer. B'suras Tayvos. Thank you very much.
No humanity whatsoever. It would be wrong to have compassion because they're not good right now. They're worse than animals.
We're killing them. We're killing them.
Doesn't matter. They deserve to be killed.
They deserve.
God does not want them on this earth.
True.
God
and at the same time,
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.